guys, welcome back to the Brotherhood of Gaming. Now if you guys remember, back in the early 90s, it was customary that every video game developer had to have their own Sonic the Hedgehog and own Mario. Their own icon, if you will. And some video game icons faded into obscurity and were rather weird, but some were able to stand the test of time. And I think many people will definitely recognize the name and the character, Earthworm Jim.
That's right. Now the original Earthworm Jim game spawned several sequels, comic books that were published by Marvel. Seriously. And of course a cartoon show.
Earthworm Jim, he's such a groovy guy. Earthworm Jim, he rockets through the sky. Cruising through the universe, having lots of fun. Here comes Earthworm Jim, you know that he's a mighty one.
But how does the original hold up? Does it still hold up? Is it fun to play?
I don't know, let's find out.
The Super Nintendo version is better. Duh.
No way, dude. It's all about the Sega Genesis.
Well, let's waste no time.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, hold it. Look, I know that Rob has artificial intelligence, but how can your Sonic figure talk?
You can hear him too?
Yeah.
I'm actually an ancient demon that took hold of this figure and is using its personality.
Wonderful.
The story of Earthworm Jim actually starts with Playmates Toys. After receiving so much success with the Ninja Turtles license, they decided that they wanted a piece of the action for themselves. So they set out to create their very own franchise. With video games beginning to come into their own, they decided to start from there. Led by the efforts of designer Doug TenNapel and programmer David Perry, Earthworm Jim was released in August of 1994 on multiple platforms. It was developed by Shiny Entertainment and published by Interplay. The game is centered around Jim, a regular everyday earthworm who encounters a mysterious supersuit. Upon entering it, he becomes a gun-toting superhero, with Jim himself acting as the head and neck, and the suit acting as his body and legs and arms.
Everybody got that?
The game is a shooting run-and-gun action platformer in which you evade and battle a host of bizarre enemies. The game is also a parody of many other titles that were popular at the time. Chief among them was the character Princess What's-Her-Name, the vain damsel in distress that Jim has to rescue and serves as a send-up for other video game princesses. First up, the Genesis version. When it comes to the character animations, this game is truly a sight to behold. Inspired by Looney Tunes characters like Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, Jim has to be one of the most expressive characters from the 16-bit era. The way he moves, looks around, and fires his weapon, the character movements in this game are so much fun to watch. Like when he holds himself up while he's hanging. Even when he is idle, you can expect him to do something crazy. Not just Jim, but all of the characters in this game have a design that just bursts with personality. Like these dogs. I mean, at least we think they're dogs. Things. These big brutes. These floating organs. I don't know, this game is nuts. Jim has a very fluent movement as he makes his way through these mostly vertical levels. You zigzag back and forth, taking out enemies and moving from one platform to another. Jim has the ability to fire his gun in multiple directions, whether it be diagonal, straight up, straight down, you name it. He possesses a secondary attack in which he uses himself, his earthworm self we mean, as a whip. That can also be performed in multiple directions. Which makes sense, because remember, his character is actually two parts. Along with the jump, Earthworm's body also aids in your movement. Throughout the levels, you will come across shiny hooks that you can swing on. By pressing your whip button, you can swing from one side to another. Not to mention, hanging from zip lines that will take you to other areas. Another handy maneuver that you will need is his helicopter spin. Once jumping in midair, if you repeatedly tap the jump button, he will float. This becomes essential later in the game, if you want to prevent taking damage. Items you can collect include ammo for your pistol. Now when you fire off your rounds, you will eventually reach 0, but if you let it, they will gradually replenish itself back to 100. Also, keep a lookout for these plasma shots that will destroy enemies with one single long blast. Energy cells are also present. The game does not have a health bar though. Instead, it keeps track by using percentage. When you take a hit, the percentage drops, and if it reaches 0, your spacesuit will explode. So gather as much energy cells as you can to keep it replenished. And of course, there are your standard extra lives. In between levels, you compete in what is called anti-asteroids. Here, the camera is behind Jim as he races through space on a rocket ship through a wormhole. Get it? He is competing against a villain named Psychro. You have to avoid incoming asteroids while collecting items like rocket boosts. Now, if you win the race, the next level will start automatically. But if you do not, You will have to fight a boss fight against Psychro and have to win in order to advance. The game's levels typically have mini boss fights. Our personal favorite is the Snowman in Hell. Yeah, you heard me. The level is called What the Heck, and you're pretty much on a hell planet with a comedy version of A Night on Bald Mountain playing in the background. Oh, and you get to fight a lawyer. Yeah, the stage is pretty damn awesome. But not all of the stages receive high marks, however, as the game does feature a water-based level. There is a section where you have to guide yourself through underwater obstructions while on a time limit, and making sure not to crash into jagged rocks. It seems like a callback to the electric seaweed level from the original TMNT game on the NES. And yeah, it is just as annoying. But at the very least, the game does provide some variety.
But now, how does the Super Nintendo version compare to it? Well, at the fundamental level, both games are virtually identical, with the same gameplay. But there are some key differences between these games on the technical aspects. First, let's start with the look of these games. Earthworm Jim on the Super Nintendo, for the most part, has much brighter graphics. Again, most part. A good example is when you're fighting the Hellcat boss. Now on the Snes, you can see a colorful background, while on the Sega, it's pretty much all black. But on the For Pete's Sake level, which is an escort mission, lovely, the Super Nintendo version seems to be a little more blander, while the Sega just pops out more. However, in the Junkyard level, there is some really cool sunflare effect that is not there on the Sega version. The main thing is that when the game came over to the Super Nintendo, it was done with lower resolution. Now this made characters, like Jim, look a little wider compared to the Sega counterpart. This also caused the Super Nintendo version to be without some effects, like the warped water effect here. Also, it seemed like levels on the Super Nintendo just took a little bit longer to load up. The sound effects were also altered a bit. When Jim gets an item or touches a continue in the Sega version, you would hear a "oh yeah" or "plasma." In the Super Nintendo, you would just get a generic "yippee." Also, the bullet sound effect had a more meaner sound as compared to the Super Nintendo one. Now when it comes to the music, well, we feel that they're both pretty good, just in different ways. Now on the Genesis, it had a more grittier sound to it thanks to its synthesizer, but the Super Nintendo is no slouch either, as it seemed to have a little more bass to it. But overall, we prefer the Sega beats as we feel that they fit the character better. Now on either one though, we have to say that both games are pretty challenging. While for the most part, it is pretty fair, but there are some BS moments here and there, like respawning at a continue and immediately getting bum rushed by a flying enemy, or enemy character animations that manage to slip through incoming attacks. Also, the humor in this game is pretty darn random, which may be a turn-off for some. I mean, look, some people will be into that sort of thing, while others won't. What can we say? So overall, how do we feel about both these versions? Well, in our opinion, we feel that the character animations are pretty close to each other, while graphics are kinda all over the place. The Genesis does have an overall more darker feel, but the Super Nintendo is brighter and more detailed despite the resolution. The music and sound effects we prefer on the Sega Genesis, so ultimately, that is the one we're giving the edge to, but not by much. The Super Nintendo one is by no means a butchered port, and it is just as playable. Also, one final note, the Sega Genesis one actually had an extra level that was made exclusively for it, Intestinal Distress. So, with that, it's enough to put it over the top. Either way, Earthworm Jim is an expressive, wild, and bit taxing adventure. Powered by his humor and charm, it's no wonder why many retro gamers look back at him fondly.
Whoa, that was a lot of fun.
Please, don't hurt me.
Well, there you guys have it. That's Earthworm Jim on the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. The first game, anyway. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that they're both equally as good games? Do you guys think one is vastly superior over the other? Let us know in the comments below what you think. After all, we all know that... You hear? Anyway, you've been watching the Brotherhood of Gaming video game show. I've been your host, William Morris.
I'm your co-host, Eugene Morris.
This is Sega vs. Snes on the Brotherhood of Gaming, and yeah, we got a demon to extinguish.